Hey man, Pastor Brad here, 80s Christian metal musician and teaching pastor, and I want to talk to you about the super important topic of how do we avoid screwing our life up, right? I think that's something that we're probably all pretty interested in. Specifically, we're going to talk about what happens when we let our flesh get in the driver's seat, because when we let our flesh, that is our sin nature is what the Bible calls it, when we let it get in the driver's seat, it'll screw you up, man. Big time. We're going to talk about that coming up. Hey man, Pastor Brad here. Welcome in. So glad that you're here for this teaching on how not to screw your life up, right? Specifically, talking about the flesh and what happens when it gets in the driver's seat. It's going to rock you up. It's going to build you up. It's really going to encourage you. If this is your first time to watch one of my videos, I want to encourage you to subscribe, okay? Listen, here's what I do. I love to create 80s style, hard rock, metal music that glorifies Jesus, okay? I'm a guitar player primarily. I just love that kind of music, and I love to glorify Jesus and build you up with it. I do a lot of original material. I also do, create parodies. Right now, I'm encouraging everybody to check out my new single called Blessed Believer. It's a parody of Cat Scratch Fever, okay? Cat Scratch Fever, so Blessed Believer. It's a great classic tune. Had a lot of fun remaking it. I know it'll rock you up. I'll put the link to it in the description. Hit the like button, because every time you do that, it tells the algorithm on YouTube that this video is worth other people seeing. It encourages the algorithm to share the video. So I really appreciate you hitting that like button. Now we're going to get into this teaching. This is a segment of a teaching that I taught here at First Christian Church in Cookeville, Tennessee, where I pastor. A segment of a message where I was talking about faith, and I'm talking here specifically about what happens when we don't walk by faith, but when we walk by flesh, how it screws us up, man. I hope it'll really bless you. If you have any questions, comments, reactions, I'd love to hear about them in the comments section. That would be awesome. All right, God bless you. Hope this is an encouragement to you. 3 things that happen when we walk by the flesh. First, we magnify our difficulties. We get all caught up with how big the problem is. We're going to look at a passage in Numbers. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. So it's book 4, chapter 13. And at this point in the story of God's people, God has led Israel out of bondage. They've been in Egypt for 400 years as slaves. God sent Moses, called him at the burning bush. Remember that? And sent him to go be the deliverer. Let my people go. Pharaoh said no. 10 plagues crushed them. Matter of fact, they were so ready for Israel to leave, God says he made them favorably disposed. That means they were so ready for them to leave, they said, take our stuff too. You want gold? You want anything you want? Just take it. Let's get out of here. So they plundered the Egyptians. Okay? And they walked out, free people, and God led them through the Red Sea. And when the Egyptians tried to follow them, what did he do? He crushed them. I mean, this is a major point. He crushed the most powerful military country in the world at that time. Okay? Defeated them. What did Israel have to do? Trust and obey. That's all they had to do. They didn't lift a finger. And he took care of it. He led them through there to Mount Sinai, where he gave them his law, and he called them to be his people, and he made his covenant with them. And then he said, okay, I'm going to give you a land that is flowing with milk and honey. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing. Trust and obey. Step in. I'll fight for you, just like I have. I'll continue to do. You'll be blessed. Just trust and obey me. So he told them to choose 12 spies, 1 leader from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Go spy the land out. Go check it out. Just go see if it's everything I told you it would be. So they do that, and they come back, and 2 of the spies say, oh my goodness, it's awesome. Let's go get it. Their names are Caleb and Joshua. You may remember those names. There are 10 who say, it's awesome. It's everything God said it would be, but the people are too big. They're too powerful. Their forts are too strong. We can't do it. I mean, yeah, I know God just crushed Egypt and all that, but not these guys.
right? You know what I've always found interesting about this? Nobody remembers these guys. We remember the two that trusted, but we don't remember the others. I just find that very interesting. And so, as is the case, though, this is so human nature, the negative report gets contagious. There's two guys saying, absolutely, God can do it. Remember Mount Sinai? Remember the smoke and the fire and all that and the parting of the sea? Come on, God can do it. But the negative, fearful report begins to get contagious and spread among the people, and they say, oh, we can't do it. That's kind of what generally happens with fear. We magnify our difficulties. We get all caught up with how big the problem is. And you know what happens to these folks who say no is, of course, they end up, God says, well, if you don't want to trust me, you can just live in the wilderness for the rest of your life. And I find it so interesting. I know people who are still in the wilderness right now. You know, it's like, I believe in God. Yeah, but are you stepping into trusting him? Right? Because it's amazing. You see such a great example with the people of Israel here. God's promised them the promised land, which is such a symbol of freedom and life and walking in his blessing and walking with him. He's promised them this. They still have to fight the good fight. They still have to engage and go take it. And see, it's the same with us today. God has promised us life in Christ, but we have to get up and walk by faith each day. Trust that. Fight that good fight, right? Finish that race. Keep that faith, as Paul said. Well, these folks said, no. So they lived out their lives in the wilderness. Never got out of the wilderness because they wouldn't trust. Now, God took care of them. He provided them food. Their sandals never wore out. It was a miraculous experience. But when all those folks had died, then this next generation, God said, okay, now we're ready. Let's do this again. This next generation, we get to the book of Joshua in chapter 2. This time, Joshua's the leader now. He's taken over from Moses, and he sends in a couple spies that he hand-picked. I ain't going through that old thing again, right? And they go in, and they go into the city of Jericho, and they find this lady named Rahab. They encounter her, and she's a citizen there of Jericho. And the king of Jericho has found out that there's spies from Israel in the land. They're scared to death of the Israelites. We'll hear more about that in a second. And Rahab hides them, protects them. And because of that, they actually spare her life when they conquer Jerusalem, and she becomes part of the nation of Israel. But listen to what she says to these spies. This is so, I just think, amazing. Joshua chapter 2, verse 11. When we, the people here in Jericho, heard it, that is, about the Red Sea and how God crushed the Egyptians 40 years ago, right? When we heard that story 40 years ago, our heart melted in fear and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven and on the earth below. Translation, we've been ready to surrender for 40 years. We've just been waiting on you to come. I just find that amazing. It made me think, how many promises is God ready to fulfill in my life that have been too afraid to step into and trust him for? You know, it's like the victory's already won. Just trust and obey and step in. So powerful. The second thing that happens when we live by our flesh instead of faith is that we focus on our inability. I just can't. And the truth is, we probably can't in and of ourselves. Numbers 13, verse 33. We seemed like, this is the spies who came back and they're giving their report, right? We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And we looked the same to them. And I just found it so interesting as I read that I thought, how in the world did they know what they looked like to those people? How do they know that? And it just made me realize, you know what? This is how fear in our life works. Fear does this. We assume things. We assume the worst. We assume it's all over. We give up before we even step into the fight. Faithless fear often makes false assumptions that aren't true. Flesh just runs to, I can't, I won't, I'll never, I don't measure up, I'm not able, which in and of ourselves, it's true. Faith is just the opposite. Faith doesn't operate on what I think. It operates on what God has said. And in God, I am a new creation. I'm a child of God. I'm redeemed. I'm part of a royal priesthood, and you are too. I'm a new creation in Christ. The old is gone, the new has come. I am able. I can do all things in Christ. I will step forward in trust and see my God fulfill his faithful promises. It's awesome. But when we walk by flesh, we magnify our inabilities. Number 3, we get discouraged, we complain, we give up, and we blame God. Did I just describe somebody's week? You know what I mean? This is just where our flesh goes. And sometimes we don't blame God, but we blame the system, or we blame the world, or we blame that person at work, or we blame somebody because it can't be our fault, right? Numbers 14, verses 1 through 3. And then the whole company. So this is the Israelites who have just received this bad report from the 10 who didn't trust God, and this is their response to them. And then the whole community began weeping aloud. They cried all night long. Their voices rose in a great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. I feel so bad for Moses and Aaron. They're like, look, man, I just saw a bush burning one day. God called me into this, and I'm just trying to follow him. And now y'all think that it's all about me. And it's not, right? I'm just following him and trying to lead you where he's leading me. If only we had died in Egypt, or even here in the wilderness, they complained. Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Boy, they sure know a lot about God's plan, don't they? But this is just how the flesh works. It just assumes the worst. We're all going to die. It's over. It's history. Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? I just crack up. What short memories people have. Here's the truth, guys. This is so good, so true, and it might really speak to somebody today. If you've lived in slavery a long time, it's hard to start thinking like a free person. Slaves just kind of lose their ability to stand on their own feet and step forward, and they just get beaten down, and they kind of give up. Flesh will surrender freedom for the sake of security and safety every time. Just take care of me. Just make sure nothing bad happens, and I'll do whatever I need to do. But freedom always requires us to step in, to trust the Lord, to press through, to go to the battle with trust in him, knowing that he is with us. It requires that trust that obeys. It makes me think about when I first recommitted my life to Christ. I was baptized as a little kid, 10 years old, at Bethany Christian Church. But you know why I was baptized? Because Tony Van Tassel was baptized the week before. I'm just being honest. It was the summer to do it. I want to be baptized too. And I knew what to say, so I said all the right things. But I didn't know anything about giving my heart to Christ. And I demonstrated that for the next several years. But when I was 20, God got a hold of my heart and I returned to him. In 1987, I remember making that U-turn again and returning to wanting to follow God with my whole heart. And I stepped back into wanting to live by faith, not by flesh, not by myself, but by him. And I started fresh. And every day after that now, I've gotten up, and I have not been a perfect man, but I have said, you know what, Lord, you're my God. And I love you, and I'm building my life around you. And I'm going to live that way the rest of my life. And I know that that's what you want to. That's what this is about. Choosing to follow